Good morning and welcome to In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. I'm so glad you ladies are here. If you are here live with us today, don't feel um, um, intimidated or afraid to throw some things in the chat as things come up for you, or maybe there's a quote or something that you feel needs to be repeated. Throw that in the chat. If you don't want to forget what it brought up for you and you want to discuss it later, throw it in the chat. We will have that for everybody. And then also, if you're watching the replay, same thing. Throw things in the chat, ask questions, share your perspective, all those things, because that is what this sisterhood is about. So thank you so much for being here. And this morning, we are going to talk about creative thinking and what that can mean in your life and business, and how that can transform some of the small things, some of the trivial things, some of the big things in your business into something that someone's like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Or how did you think about that? Or where did that come from? And you can inspire others around you, because that is the juice. That is the good stuff of this life, this world. And it's your magic. Your magic can create that. So I wanted to share the 3 P's of creative thinking, and that is pause. The first one is pause, stopping and piecing out. There's another P, piecing out what it is that is stopping you, or is holding you back, or is something that is a mindset that you need to change. Acknowledging is that pause. Second is presence. When you are present with that obstacle, creative thinking can create that belief that it can happen, that whatever you're looking at is something that's not as big as you thought it was, or something that, like I said, you can believe that it can be done. So believe it can be done is a quote from the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. I've been rereading that lately, so you might hear a little bit more about that as we go along. But his quote is, believe it can be done. So when you're looking at creative thinking, it's not just writing or creating art or solving an engineering problem. It can be, yes, it can be writing a book. And for me, the creative thinking part of that was finding time to do the thing. That can be creative thinking, is just finding the time to do the thing that you want to do. Another book we quoted a few weeks ago was The 4-Hour Work Week. The idea of only working 4 hours a week, oofda. But if you can believe it can happen, then a 4-hour work week isn't so hard. It isn't so hard to fathom. What about that big sale or that big transaction you have coming up, that big conversation? You can have a lot of fun with those too. And it takes sitting down, pausing, clearing your plate, and being present with that obstacle, with that big thing, and taking smaller bites of it. It can also be the idea of going viral. I've been having a little bit of these conversations with some of my coaching clients, the idea of going viral. And that requires intentionality and that thought of, hey, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be cool if that was possible? Well, it goes back to that quote, believe it can be done. And then who the heck knows how? But let's go, right? Another example of putting creative thinking to work is in your relationships, because we are not the same people. We did not end up with a carbon copy of ourselves as our spouse, right? Like, wouldn't that be scary? Myself as a Scorpio is like, I don't need another one of you, aka me, right? So using that creative thinking in those ways just takes spending some time with those things. The third P is perspective. So that's, to me, I put that in a visual of like literally taking a step back. Britta, one of our friends here, she invited me to a mind magic seminar, which she is a certified coach and all the things. But they did a perspective experiment, and that was a lot of fun. And the way they said it was, put it on a glass table, like, so you can see all sides of it, all angles, put it on a glass table. And I thought that was really an interesting way to look at whatever it is that's holding you back from that creative thinking. It creates creative thinking. Creative thinking allows your words and thoughts and even gift giving to come easier, because you pause and you think about that person or situation. You gain presence, so you maybe remove some past emotions or whatever you're going through on the other end of things, and you're being present with that person or that thought. And they're like, hey, what would they like? I'm thinking about gift giving, like, what would they like? And that helps you shift your perspective. So the idea of creating or giving your words or your thoughts or your gifts is shifting that perspective enough to remove yourself so that you can fully release whatever that creativity, that creative thing is in yourself. It goes to this thought I have now thinking about all this. Cody Bateman says, find out who you are, then give yourself away. And pausing and gaining presence, you find out who you are. Like, even though you've stepped back from that issue or that thought or that obstacle, you still have yourself. You still have that foundation. And so then when you share and you have that creative thought, you gain a different perspective. You're giving yourself away without emptying your own cup, without losing something of your own. So it just brought me to this idea of gift giving and how, like, you can, I don't know, you can really release what you have to think about the gift and think about the person, the recipient. And that goes with that big sale that we talked about, right? Because then it can be about them. Yeah, you get a good commission or you get something out of the deal, whatever that might be. But that's what you get. What did they get? Right? Shifting that perspective to what do they get? What about the recipient? And this also goes for your relationships and the relationship you have with yourself. So the relationship you have with yourself, again, is that idea of you've stepped back, you still have yourself. And yet you can give from yourself without emptying yourself. And then that goes into your relationships with your significant others, your close friends, your family, knowing that you are still whole, you are still you still have that who you are. And yet who you are helps decide that perspective. But when you distance yourself just enough, then you can release it. Then you can give more fully without emptying yourself. I think that's a big thing, especially right now. I'm like hands over my heart right now. Like right this time of year, we're still in the holiday season. For those of you who are watching a replay. And sometimes I get this from some family members of like, what can I get you for Christmas? I'm like, well, you don't have to get me anything if you're not inspired to get me something. Like, that's not what this is about, right? If you're going to give me something on April 12th. Like, I don't care. It's all about that inspiration. And I think by taking that pause and being present with the idea of giving a gift, with the idea of transforming a relationship, with the idea of gaining that sale, or working less hours in the week, you have that ability to then be like, oh, what would Stevie do? Like, what would Kathy do? Right? Like, oh, we can have fun with this, right? Because you can shift your perspective. So I have a bonus P for you, and this is for Thursday, our next session. And that P is promptings. What you can do with it in the moment when you're not taking that time to pause and be present and gain that perspective. What about those just snap finger things? So on Thursday, we'll talk more about promptings and just how that can transform your life and business. I mean, sometimes creative thinking hits you when you just least expect it, when you've made a little bit of room for it, and there it is. So today, going into discussion, I want to hear from some of you ladies on, like, maybe what are you stuck on in your business, or what have you done so much and now you feel like it's run its course? Or is there something that someone else in the group can offer perspective on and help you shift? Is there something that you're looking forward to in the new year and haven't fully wrapped your head around? This discussion is going to be, I don't know, I think it's going to be fun. So I'm going to kind of sign off here, but I'm going to keep recording into our discussion. We've got a nice small group here with us live, and we're going to see where this goes. And like I said, on Thursday, we're going to talk more about those kind of snap finger things that can transform that perspective, that creative thinking in the moment. And sometimes I call those promptings. So thank you so much for coming here today for our sisterhood session with In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. Here soon, I'm going to be getting some things, some awesome little things to go in our founding members packages. And so that's kind of my next thing, is having a couple conversations with some of my friends and I'm looking for the word, colleagues, to help me just make these packages fun and exciting and something that they're going to keep and know the meaning behind each thing. Like, I really feel like it's going to be like this little treasure chest that everybody opens. So I'm super excited about that. But let's get into our conversation and see where that goes. Thank you. Hey, ladies. Welcome. Starting with that first question, is anyone stuck on something? Like, whether it's something they've always done in their business and are wondering how to shift it, or something that's caught your attention that you don't know what to do with. I'm gonna cough. Ah, there. Dry spot in my throat. Go ahead, Kathy.
I just jiggled, Stevie. Well, I really like this pause presence perspective. It's a great practice. And I think when you get stuck on something, this is such a good go-to to pause, to be present and to gain perspective. I love find out who you are and give yourself away. I love that. That is so good. And I think practicing the pause, presence, and perspective really, really brings that about. And have we ever completed it? Have we ever accomplished it? No, but gosh, this is such a great practice. And I just wanted to share, there's a gentleman I knew that very successful man, very successful man. But what he did, like every other week or at least once a month, I don't remember exactly, he would go away. He would pull himself out and go someplace and think about, and that was his creative thinking time. And he would come back and he would think of different businesses. He would think of different ways to handle stuff. And so when you shared this today, it immediately took me there. And it also reminded me what a great way to just keep this in mind to practice. This is such a great practice. Thank you.
Huh. I love what you said about removing yourself. Like, I mean, I was saying that on a theoretical, right? Like sitting in the same room, flipping the page, starting with a blank page or whatever, but that remove yourself. My writing coach, Kate, does that every few weeks. She rents an Airbnb and leaves for 3 days. And that's where she works because she's got kids at home and she does other things. And like, that's her time. That is 100% hers, but she has to communicate that. Right. But yeah, physically removing yourself, it is a thing. Curious, Kathy, is there, going into 2024, is there something you think that's kind of just been over here saying, hey, pay attention to me, you got to change what you're doing over here, or do you really want to keep doing this, or this is really working? Like, I don't know, is there anything, and this may be just a question for everybody, is there something that's waving their their little flag? I wish I had one, like, hey, I'm over here.
Yeah, I'll comment. Yeah, I'm doing this class and I always get wound up a little bit. Am I doing enough? Am I doing things that are going to be useful and helpful? Am I marketing myself? I'm challenged. Partly I think my age or whatever, but just knowing how to market myself. And at the same time, it's like, I don't make a ton of money doing it. And so you try to be conservative, but that is looming over here. That is my little red flag over here, is that I am concerned about it and, wanting it to be good for people, and but yet also wanting to market it so that people do come. So, yep, that's my little thing over here that's haunting me. So I need to pause and be present and gain some perspective.
I think also you just have to remind yourself that you've done this before, right? Like, you've walked this before. So going back and saying, okay, what worked? What kind of fell flat? What didn't? And just go with it. Like, It's business. It's not personal. And it's really just something that you're bringing value. And one thing you mentioned, like not making a ton of money at it. In which case, raise your price. And people, because sometimes we get in this, I don't know, this thing like, oh, nobody's buying or nobody's investing, or everybody's saying it's too much or whatever. Well, sometimes you're just in the wrong market. And I'll stick with this 100% of the time when it comes to this sisterhood too. Like, the transformation happens in the transaction. You can give your stuff away for free every stinking day of the year. But it's the people that raise their hands and write you a check, they're the ones you're affecting. They're the ones that are getting the transformation. You may have given away to 100,000 people, but the 3 people that have paid you $1,000, $100,000 to transform, they're getting their value. I think, I don't know, it could just be this idea. I'm a numbers person, so I like to have fun with this, but it could just be like, as many times as you give it away, that's how many X's, like, for each person. So like, one person gets 10x because I've given away 10 times. Now this person paid for it. 1 person out of 10, right? Like, I don't know. You can find that a positive way to look at that all day long, but raise your price and and transform some lives. Like, it can be that simple because it happens in the transaction.
Well, and I think you make a good point too. I think I do take this personal, and it's not personal, like you said. I do. And the other good point I think you made too is, maybe the people that I'm marketing to aren't the right people. And I have thought about that, but have kind of been a little bit lost on, okay, where do I go? And I just pray, Lord, would you just please give me some ideas about where I should go or whatever. But yeah, you're right. Those are two good things. Not to take it personal, because I think I do.
We all
And
do.
and maybe it's not the right people yet.
Or it might not be the right time for people.
Mhm.
Because I know I've been doing what I do for 12 years, and there are people that were like in fitness classes with me for years. And just recently, like 3 of them started doing our challenges and getting good results, but they were not in a place before where they were ready to even start that transformation.
Yep. I agree, Stevie. Timing is everything. It is. And being that consistent, this is who I am and what I do. And if you don't want to pay me for it, I still love you. But if you're going to pay me, it's going to be awesome. Right? Like, and you just have to keep going. I love that. Keep going, Stevie. Keep going. Let's hear it.
That was all I got. Unless you have a prompting or a question.
Well, I think it really goes to like, what has you stuck? Or is there, yeah, go ahead.
So for me, and it's like a different perspective because actually it's funny. I don't know if you can still see it on my wrist. I guess you can. I did in green. At the beginning of the year, I always do like a word of the year. And one of the things that came up was this spiral. Especially I do a lot of like astrology stuff. So like everyone always wants Mercury retrograde to be bad. But it's more of like reflecting, reviewing, renewing, and realizing that like when you come around to something again, you're not really doing the same thing again. You've moved in this spiral up levels, even though it feels like you're not the same person. And so I kind of have this situation going on. And yesterday I did some draws for cards because I don't know which path to take. And as I'm reading through these cards, like this came up and I drew this spiral. And I'm like, it's funny because I drew this like almost a year today. Because you do a lot of like my pre-year planning stuff in December. Almost a year to the day was when I put this symbol in my planner when this came up again. And a lot of it is like coming back to the same part over and over again. So a year ago, it's actually funny. Shaina will know some of these dates, but so December 3rd of last year, I quit my serving job of 17 years. So I always say I put my apron down and I started a job that I thought was the perfect job for me. Absolutely loved it. But things happen. You find out who some people really are, and it's just not really the vibe I'm vibing with. But December 3rd of this year, my sister-in-law messaged me and I actually served a table for the first time. And today will be my last day doing that because I was like, you know what? I was really great at this, but this is not what I want to do. So part of the other job I had was getting a group fitness certification and realizing how much they pay and like how awesome their schedules are. So essentially like serving, you build your own schedule, but you work a whole lot less hours for a lot more money. So it's like taking that step forward and knowing like technically right now I have 2 jobs that overlap and I'm going to have to quit one of them because it ain't going to work. So making that decision and knowing that like I have some things coming up and just like waiting it out until that final piece falls and knowing like, okay, this is what I need to do. We're not going backwards. We have to go forwards and really work towards the thing we keep saying that we want instead of just playing it safe.
Yes. I love that. Like you went back to serving and you were like, oh yeah, no.
Well, and like, I remember like I could get set like 10 tables at a time and I could just rock it out. Difference is, I got a day of training, which was literally just me following this girl around and her explaining serving basics to me, which is not what I needed. I needed to know like POS system on this handheld device that's the size of a Game Boy Color. I was not, and like finding all the buttons and the whatever, and like you get 4 tables at once. And I'm like, I would be so much better at this if I had these skills how to use this stupid Game Boy thing. Like, this isn't the fun kind of stress anymore.
Right. But knowing that sometimes you have to get a taste of it again or just keeping that vision, right? You have a vision for what it's going to look like in 6 months and a year and taking, I don't know, going back and being like, oh no, I know why now. Right. Like,
I loved my job until I didn't. And it's always the people, which I think is hilarious. But like, I loved that job and then I left and then I was like, I can always go serve tables. And I'm like, this is going to be like plan Z. Like, this is not a good time.
That's funny because serving tables would be my plan XYZ. Like, I'm so bad at it, but I could, I guess I could if I had to, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stevie, I think that is so cool about your personality. You're just a go-getter. You get crap done. And I mean, I can relate to that. I used to do wait tables too, man. And I loved it. I loved the buzz and the people, but it's like, boy, I tell you what, your personality is wonderful and you're going to get stuff done. So I just needed to tell you that. I think you're adorable.
High fives, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. So I think also something that requires some creative thinking is like Stevie's saying, like these jobs that overlap, like aligning things in your schedule, just in your calendar, can require creative thinking because we can look at it and say, oh no, Tuesdays don't work. Nope. But really, if you move 2 things or have one conversation, it can work. Right? So like sometimes I think creative thinking is blocked by like this random avoidance, maybe. Like, and sometimes we don't know why we're avoiding something, but go ahead, Stevie.
Oh, yeah. So I know like it's consistently a problem for me. I started teaching a second pound class at 1 o'clock, and then in my head, I either forget that exists or I forget that there's like commute time on both sides of this and just don't plan efficiently. And I'm like, I got to start looking at like the puzzle instead of just pushing the pieces down blindly. I need to like check my calendar and be like, okay, this fits here, or no, this doesn't. I cannot make it from like 40 minutes north in 2 seconds to 40 minutes south. Like it just doesn't work. I get too excited and I just like throw the puzzle piece down instead of like checking to make sure it fits. I'm the opposite. Make sure I can do all the things. You cannot do all the things. You still have to make a picture with your puzzle.
Yeah, I love that visual. Thank you for that. Like, yeah, the pieces don't fit. I just think about like my so when I was pregnant with Meredith, the last few weeks we had twice weekly appointments for monitoring and all of that. And I remember they were on Tuesdays and Fridays. And when we went to schedule them, she was like, we either do Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday. And I already had all the Friday appointments set, and I was already in town on Fridays, but mostly my day in town was Wednesdays. And so I instantly was like, how am I going to do this? Right? This isn't my, but then it had to happen right there because I wasn't going to like call them and do it over the phone to set these appointments. So I literally had to take a step back, and I was like, let's just do it. This is my priority, right? This baby. So my day in town is just going to change. Like it's that simple. I'm pretty sure I had a client on Tuesdays and I just changed that day. And at some point, like, it's not personal, it's business. Like, hey, I have this change, it needs to be on this day, does that work for you? Like, it can be a simple conversation. But I remember distinctly sitting there scheduling the appointments with the receptionist, and in my head, because Wednesday was always my day in town, I just shifted it to Tuesday. And the answer was yes. And so when we set appointments, I was like, yeah, 9:20 works, blah, 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 10:15. Yep. And we just scheduled like 20 appointments in 20 minutes. And she was like, that was the easiest scheduling I've ever done. She was like, what just happened? And I was like, I don't know. It had to happen. And I have my own schedule, and I'm only 10 days out usually on my schedule. So I just did it. And she was like, oh, wow, that was so easy. And I remember her saying that, like, it really was. It was that easy. But that required, I think, creative thinking in that moment of not being set in stone on what day I was going to go into town. Like, I had to. Like, I didn't really have an option. I mean, you can freak out and lose sleep over it, which I've done in the past too, in changing what I'm doing, or what the schedule is. But really, this goes back even to last week. Like, what chaos are you going to allow in? And that was one I was like, well, this baby is my chaos. So this is just where that has to be. I probably had to shift a couple other appointments along the way, or go to town an extra day in the week. But I just remember her saying, like, wow, that was really easy. And I'm like, well, it had to be. Like, I don't know why it has to be hard for other people, you know? But I love that. Thank you, Stevie. I don't know, that just made me like, oh yeah, I've done that too. So I guess I'm just curious, does anyone have any other stories on perspective? Maybe something you've shared with someone else, some creative thinking you've helped someone else with. I know Stevie and I were talking about her adopted 11-year-old who's given her some grief. And that requires so much creative thinking because they're moving at their own pace. And sometimes you just have to think on the fly. I remember I had a little in Big Brothers Big Sisters who, when we first met, she was 9. And man, you got to be on your toes. Like, they'll ask you questions where you're like, okay, wait, let's think about that before I just go into an answer. Right? Like, where are you coming from, little girl? So I'm curious, maybe there's a story you have with your kiddos on that. Maybe there's something you can glean onto me for my future clone I have. She's napping right now, by the way.
Well, I'll just share. That one's kind of a fun one for me since I work a lot with families and whatever, but pause, presence, perspective, or whatever. And how you can get there too with kids is that you're always curious. And especially this pre-adolescent age, you're always very curious because tell me what you're thinking, or why is that? Really, is that right? What do you think about that? So, I think sometimes I love this today. I've taken tremendous notes. But I think with what I'm sharing, it goes along with this. It's like, sometimes we just need to take a step back because, we get so wound up in coming up with an idea, or I need to have an answer, or I need to have some kind of guidance or whatever. And it's like, not really. Initially, we just need to take a moment. And I think especially with kids is that you become curious with them, especially like not your baby. Shaina, you're so lucky right now. You just dress her and you tell her what she's going to do, and that's the way it is. And she's going to eat whatever you give her.
And sometimes she just randomly screams at me.
Yes. Absolutely. But, when they start to become more independent and wanting to be their own person, which we're all going to do and whatever, but I don't know. I always tell people to be more curious. And I have to remind myself that too, to just be more curious and ask more questions. And I think that's going to help to generate creative thinking. You'll know more and better what to do. So I really appreciated this session today because it's such a great reminder. And to me, it fits into a lot of things that I'm doing in my life, with my kids, with my family, with my work, with my with my class that I'm going to be doing. And so anyway, I say all of that to apply this good creative thinking to the kids. And one of the strategies is to just be more curious, which is pausing, being more present because you're asking questions, and then you'll gain a perspective on what to do or say. So anyway, I don't mean to be like bossy or know-it-all because I don't, but I have really enjoyed today. I can just say that.
Thank you, Kathy. I definitely understanding their perspective of like, why? Let's hear it, right? Go ahead, Stevie. You unmuted yourself.
Yeah. So I agree with Kathy, and that plays to just like kids when you get to an 11-year-old, especially if they're in public school, they're going to ask you some questions. And it's always a good idea before you over explain something to ask them what they think it is every time. Because sometimes they do know, and you're just going to look at them and be like, oh man, you 100% know what that is. But always ask them what they think it is, especially like when they're little and they don't pronunciate well, because sometimes what you think they're saying is not what they think they're saying. But even from like a coaching perspective, same thing. Like if you have someone, we cover it in like fitness training and in like nutrition training. The things people will tell you, and they give examples in my fitness training book about like one girl didn't want to sweat. So that was like her version of exercise. So coming up with like yogas or things like that, where they don't want to do that, or like realizing that not everyone comes from the same place as you do, or lives in the same type of community, or has the same support network. So maybe like they can't just go run outside because it's not a safe environment, or maybe they don't have someone to watch their kids, and really feel like figuring out what those barriers are so that you can find that like creative way to get around them. Because if you're just telling them over and over again, do this, do this, do this, they might not be able to do that. And it might, like, for some people, it's going to seem like a silly excuse. But if you're actually coaching people to be successful, you have to figure out what that barrier is and help them get past it.
Right. So it is that curiosity, like, all right, what, I mean, if you don't want to sweat, I definitely sweat a lot less living in a dry climate, by the way. I love that. Figuring out those barriers, because you need to know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And well, where the person is coming from, not necessarily the barrier, because you may not know how to dig that up. But yeah.
And I mean, it could be as simple as like, that's why I always ask people first, are you allergic to anything? Because I cannot build you an entire meal plan if I don't know, or like, do you hate something? Either side of it. I need to know like what works for you, or like what their job is sometimes too, because servers and nurses, I don't care. I don't want you to follow the meal plan exactly. I need you to put like the shake in where you're the busiest, because I know that you can stop and drink something, but you may not be able to eat anything. So I don't care what the order is. I need you to put it in the time that makes sense for you.
Right. Well, and also I just think about occupations, like my husband being a mechanic, he was doing all the leg exercises, right? But he needs something for his arms and stretching and things like that. Now this is something he's still working on, but now he's shifted to being in a machine, operating a machine 85% of the time. So now he does have to do more of those exercises, more of that mobility stuff, because he's not physically running up and down that machine 52 times a day. He's only doing 5, right? And that was something I warned him on when he started that job. I was like, you're going to be doing a lot more sitting than you're used to. Like, probably should have a plan for that. I love that. Figure out the barriers. I think that's a good place to stop today. Next week, talking about the other P, promptings, or later this week. I keep like, we do this twice a week. Later this week, talking about promptings, but then also trends and traditions. Like, trends are cool, but wouldn't it be cool if they stuck, right? If there was something that cool that stuck. Because trends can be, I don't know, trends can be fun, but also promptings can be fun too, because it doesn't have to be a trend to be something cool that your heart said to do. So I could go into that all day long, but we need to get back to work today. So let's do that. Thank you so much for being here and being live with us. And again, if anybody has any questions, they can throw them on the comment section as I send out this replay. And let's just see where this takes us. I'm excited that this creative thinking conversation, we could have this conversation for a few weeks, I think. I do have a vision. In the next few months, we're going to start doing some monthly hot seat coaching with me. So we'll get on here at a different time and submit questions and walk through scenarios or those questions and see where that takes us when we dive a little deeper into the specific thing, whatever that might be for you. us ladies that are here in this sisterhood. So I'm super excited about that. I think if we talk about what's holding me back from that is the communication piece of this group and really piecing that together, because I got this through in quite the whirlwind and I knew it was the right timing. And some of those pieces aren't in place yet. So as I get those in place, those things, the value of this group is just going to keep growing. So I'm super excited about that. And I just want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much. We'll see you later this week.
Thank you.
Yes. See ya.